You're listening to Liberty Buzzard with Dustin Hammett and Thomas Umstattd Jr.
Episode 35.
I'm Dustin Hammett.
I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr.
Welcome to the show where we pick at the news along the highway of American history and culture and entertainment and such and so on. And today we're going to talk about football. The first weekend of football, especially college football, was this past week. And Thomas' team played, my team played. That'd be the Texas Longhorns and the A&M Aggies, respectively. And, of course, all the other teams played. And then we have the big drama of Colin Kaepernick, the football player, the former football player, because I don't think he's really playing right now, who is like just a hangnail and will not go away. And, of course, you got Nike in there who is utilizing Colin Kaepernick's name and notoriety to sell shoes. Thomas, start us off. What do you think?
So how about them Longhorns, huh? They had one really good quarter. We won at least one of those quarters. We totally won that quarter. We may have lost the other quarters, but we won at least one of the quarters. It was very sad. UT is playing a team where a player had just died and the coach had been suspended. You think if there was ever a time when you could beat a football team, it would be when they are under fire, so to speak, from the media and the press. But they played for their lost compatriot, their lost teammate, and they played with heart, and you got to give them credit. But they won, and it broke my heart because I really wanted UT to win because we have this new magical coach, and the hope was that with the new magical coach, we would start winning, and we didn't. So I will say, though, A&M has a new style of football that I think will fit them very well. And we're not going to do a lot of play-by-play, don't worry, for those of you who don't care about football. We will talk about the cultural impacts of football. But I do want to say A&M is one of the most emotional football teams in all of college football, maybe all of football, period. And I think they...
How do you know this, Thomas?
I've been to an A&M football game, and I'm married to an Aggie, and I've got has surrounded me with Aggies for many years. And while A&M may not have the most emotional football team, I think they very clearly have the most emotional fan base of any football team. And when A&M tries to do what's called the spread offense, the tempo offense, which is what is popular in Texas, they just run out of steam. Once they get to the fourth quarter, they are so exhausted. They've been playing with so much emotion for 3 whole quarters that they just can't play that fourth quarter. And the problem with football is that it doesn't matter who wins the first 3 quarters. It only matters who wins the fourth quarter. So the classic story of A&M football, in fact, it's a meme, it's a joke, it's what's expected, is for them to win up until the fourth quarter, and then they run out of steam, they stop winning, and they lose. In fact, when I spent my $500 to take my wife to or my then girlfriend to an Aggie game because I wanted to appreciate her Aggie-ness as we were, dating. We went to an A&M football game, and wouldn't you know it, they were winning the whole game until the end when they lost at the very final minutes. And I felt like I had gotten my money's worth from that Aggie football game. I was like, yes, this is what I've been told always happens. And sure enough, it happens. And A&M now has a new coach who's using a new offensive style, which is very slow and deliberate and eats up a lot of game clock. And it allows the defense to rest and the fan base to rest. Because while Aggies are the most disciplined fan base, they are also one of the most emotional fan bases. They're also exceptionally disciplined. And when it's time to be quiet and let the offense run the ball or move the ball down the field, they get quiet. They get shockingly quiet. The stadium is so quiet when the offense is on because they're all storing up their energy for when the defense is on. So I think this change is a particularly good change to the pro-style offense, specifically taking into account the nature of the A&M fan base. The fans just can't cheer with as much ferocity in the fourth quarter as they have been all of the rest of the game when it's a 4.5-hour spread offense game. But when it's a shorter, more focused game, I think they have some hope. We'll see how they do against Clemson. We're recording this before the Clemson game, so I will not at all be surprised if A&M gets completely obliterated on Saturday. But time will tell.
Yeah, Clemson's going to be a tough test. They're the number 2 team in the nation, we played an opponent. I don't remember who they were. It's one of those Powerpuff first games where you go out there to test your strategy, and so of course we dominated, we creamed them, and it was a good show. And you always want to start off those first games where you play ranked opponents. One team's always going to walk away really, really sad. So a powerhouse versus a powerhouse, one team's going to walk away sad, demotivated, and it's going to set the tone for their whole season. Those are tough ways to start your season. But if you get in there, you play one of those D2 schools, and you know you're going to win, and you're just kind of testing out some of your theories and your changes and how you're going to play. It's kind of a better way to go, in my opinion, and what I've noticed in football. Unless you're that powerhouse team that wins the first game, in which case, if you don't come away with a lot of injuries, you're going to be all right. UT, the Texas Longhorns, yes, they did play football this weekend. I can vouch for the fact that they did play football this weekend.
It was technically a game, and it was technically football.
It was technically football. No, they actually played a pretty good game. It was neck and neck until the end. It was definitely, they were not obliterated. They came to play ball. They did play ball, and they just got beat in the end. And they actually played decent ball against Maryland, which is a pretty good team. So yeah, but therein lies the problem with Cadillac coaches. And so I'm going to shift the topic a little bit here. Still around football, but the price that we as a society pay for football. So, for example, A&M and UT both have new football coaches. A&M signed a contract last year with Jimbo Fisher, who is expected to be a winning coach. He's got a reputation as being a winning coach. He's previously won a national championship. So A&M has paid this man $70 million over the course of 10 years, a 10-year contract, $7 million a year, $70 million to come and coach college football. And if you think really long and hard about this, it's really interesting to see because if the way capitalism works is the society, by the nature of capitalism, will allocate resources to what society holds dear, to whatever gets money. So, for example, in news, all the flashy, terrible news stories get a lot of publicity because, that's the human brain wraps its brain, or the human mind wraps its brain around that death and destruction. And that's what gets the ad dollars. That's what get the clicks. That's what get the money. Same thing for football. People watch football, and so football gets our attention. It's a national pastime. It's an American culture. More so, in my opinion, than any other sport, including baseball, which is very American in origin as well. So, $70 million for a football coach. That is what society values. And Texas A&M, and we're not talking about public dollars here. We're talking about the Texas A&M Foundation, which is, I believe, a nonprofit organization, which a bunch of really stinking rich Aggies get together and pour their money into, so that we can go off and buy these Cadillac coaches. So all of these, what we call big money Ags, all of these oil-rich Aggies, they want so badly to be able to brag to their University of Texas brethren and buddies back at the hunting camp that A&M won a national championship, that they are willing to fork over millions of dollars to make it happen. And so it's just a really interesting reflection on American culture. And I'm going to get your thoughts on that, Thomas, before we move right on into Colin Kaepernick, which is directly related to this topic.
Yeah, because technically college coaches are government employees if they're for a state university. So while not all of the money necessarily comes from tax money, right? The football program brings in money. If you were to do a report of the highest paid public employee in 39 out of the 50 states, according to the Business Insider, the highest paid public employee is a coach, a football coach or a basketball coach, and not even close to like the next highest paid position. So we're talking coaches that are making upwards of $4 million a year for coaching. And I think A&M's coach is making even more than that. It was a 10-year contract for how much? 70 million, you said? 60 million?
I think it's 70 million. I'm gonna Google it real quick to make sure I got my number straight, but it's a lot of stinking money.
If that's correct, that's $7 million a year. So this 2-year-old article is out of bounds by $2 whole million. And to give you some comparison, United States presidents are paid $400,000 a year. So we're talking, we value monetarily so Barack Obama made $400,000 a year. That's what Trump is making if he deposits the money. We are paying 10 times more money for a college coach, not like the one college coach of the state, because remember, Texas has multiple highly paid college coaches. We pay 10 times more money for a college football coach than we do for a United States president, if that tells you anything about where our priorities are as a nation. And you're exactly right. The reason why they're paid so much is because the donors are donating because they want the bragging rights at the country club that their team won. College football coaches make more than NFL coaches, which is crazy. Like, you'd think NFL, that's where you make more money, but all the money, I guess, that would have gone to the players in college football all goes to the coaches instead.
Yeah, so, and this is the way I feel, and I think a lot of people feel this way, especially people who went to college. They care more about their college team, and I find college football to be more entertaining than professional football. And what those athletes can do at the professional level is absolutely insane. But at the same time, you just don't see, in my opinion, the heart. Because all of the kids that are playing college football, all of them, every single last one, want nothing more than to be a professional football player. And they're all, and it's a very thin, what's the word I'm trying to say? It's a very thin funnel to get through. There's a lot of very talented athletes, and there's only so much money to go around. There's only so many roster spots on the professional team, and they're all competing for these spots. And so if you want to get to these spots, you have to just give it your all, push through as hard as you can in order to get one of those professional football spots. So I think there's a lot more heart in college football than there is necessarily in professional football, where those players have, quote unquote, already made it. Now, that's not an absolute. There's some really interesting professional football games, but especially my alma mater and my fan base, Texas A&M Aggies. Aggies love their team pretty much more than any other sport in this world. Aggie football reigns supreme in Aggie land. And you might go out there and you might watch some pro football. You might watch the Texans. You might watch the Cowboys, whatever your flavor is. But there's just nothing in this world that compares to Aggie football for Aggies. And I know there are so many college teams out there that have the exact same opinion. And I think that's what drives all this money. So, I mean, whether it's dollars that Nike or somebody else can spend on, or that make on players by making jerseys and university memorabilia, and the universities themselves, which of course license its own logo, and they want their football teams to do well. And Thomas and I both have relatives who are in academia, and a topic of conversation I think that we both had among our academic university hired relatives is how they loathe the idea that universities are so wrapped up in football, and how football and sports and really athletics as a whole reign supreme in most major universities. But at the same time, it brings in so much money that it actually does a service to the rest of academia, because it probably brings in money and grants and research dollars just for just because a football team brings in research dollars, that it does good for the rest of academics. So it's a very weird dynamic at play. But sports really does do great things for universities, and they just make so much stinking money off of it. And from there, I think, Thomas, we should segue into Colin Kaepernick and Nike, speaking of dollars. Go ahead.
But real quick, correction. I want to, on the coach's salary, I looked it up, and the top NFL coaches are paid more than the top college coaches, but there are college coaches that make more than NFL coaches. So, for instance, A&M's new coach makes more than the Dallas Cowboys coach. So it's a Venn diagram. It's more complicated than I made it sound. But we're talking similar levels of money, college and professional. So just a real quick correction on that. And on the academic benefits, I have a uncle who's a professor at A&M. And he used to be a professor at OU. And I was like, if there's anyone who's not going to get into Aggie football, it's going to be this guy, because he had spent so much time being at OU. But you know what? Aggieland spirit is so strong. Within the last few years, he started really caring about the football games and going. And he's a big time enough professor where I think he gets season tickets to the games, and he gets invited to like the dean's boxes and all that. He got sucked in too. So,
everybody gets sucked in.
But I do want to talk about I do want to talk about Colin Kaepernick and the future of football as a sport, because it may be that our grandchildren will not be able to watch football, that it will be like cockfighting or horse racing or some other sport that isn't really celebrated into the future. So for those of you who don't know, Colin Kaepernick is famous for kneeling during the national anthem and making most football fans angry. So while the population is split kind of 50-50 on Colin Kaepernick, maybe more people supporting him than not, actually. Football fans, it's very clear, football fans do not like that. The kind of people who watch football are the kind of people who are big fans of the flag and of the kind of lip service ways that we honor the flag, and they don't appreciate what he's doing. And Nike has just signed Colin Kaepernick to a big deal where it's going to make Colin Kaepernick their next spokesperson. And I will say, as a marketing person, I see this as a really savvy move, because just by signing Kaepernick, Nike is getting millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars of free publicity. Everyone is talking about Nike right now. And every time somebody burns their Nike, some Trump person burns their Nike shoes and it makes the news, that's more coverage for Nike. Remember, Nike never fired Tiger Woods as their spokesperson for golf after all of Tiger Woods' scandals. Nike's brand is not we are a righteous brand and we uphold, traditional values. That's not their brand. That's not who they claim to be. And so when they sign somebody who is dramatic or controversial, it's not violating their brand. If Coca-Cola were to sign Nike or Colin Kaepernick, it would be a disaster, because it would bring all of this conflict with this brand they've spent so long building of being traditional values and pro-America, blah, blah, blah. But for Nike, I think it's a really savvy move. What are your thoughts, Dustin?
I agree with you. It's going to get them a lot of attention. And as far as pure marketing and word of mouth, it's going to do great things. But I don't know if Nike really fully understands the social dynamic of what they're doing. Or maybe they do and they don't care and they're making a calculated move. But basically what you have is a division of America right now. And we've talked about it several times, but I think one of the best ways, and it's more complicated than this, and so I'm oversimplifying it by magnitudes, but you have Trump's America versus the anti-Trump's America. And the Colin Kaepernicks of the world and those that support him say it's not about the flag, it's not about the military and veterans, it's about police brutality, and speaking out against police brutality and bringing attention to police brutality specifically against people of color. And I think in Colin Kaepernick's world, he's specifically thinking about Black Americans. So they are very much enraptured with this idea of this big, bad, jackbooted Gestapo police force across the nation, and they're targeting Black people, and they wake up in the morning and they eat racist Cheerios and they bleed racism, and every cop is racist. And I experienced a lot of these types of individuals as a police officer myself, and not just Black people, white people, Hispanic people. They just, no matter what you do, no matter what you say or how good of a job you try to do, in your eyes, you're a cop and you represent something that in their brain is just racist and has been anti-Black, anti-Hispanic, anti-color for eons. And so that's what it boils down to. And reading all these Twitter fights to get a gist of the sides of the debate, that's what I've determined that it boils down to. You have the people on the right that say, no, I'm pro-police. Police are doing a great job. Police officers are nothing more than people who grew up in our own neighborhoods, and they're going out there and trying to do great things. And then you have the other side who said what I already said is, police officers are all evil. And of course, the truth is very much in between. There's definitely bad police officers out there. There's great police officers out there, and they're human beings, and they are of this community. So, but that's what Colin Kaepernick's thing really comes down to. So as far getting back to Nike and their calculated marketing move, don't know. Their stock's down. I think it's down 3% today. That may be negligible in the long run. Who knows? But I don't know in the long run if Nike's move is really going to be that great for them. Because, I mean, I guess if you're aligning yourself with the anti-cop crowd, then yeah, it's a great move, and that's who you want to sell to. But then you are alienating, probably, because 50% of this nation did vote for Trump, around 50%, I should say. That's kind of estimating there. But, you're alienating 50% of this entire nation by picking a side in this debate. And I just don't know how smart of a move that is. What do you think, Thomas?
So you're thinking of things, you're not thinking as in terms of a marketer. When you're creating a brand, especially a strong brand like Nike, you're not creating a brand for everyone. And brands are as much about exclusion as they are about inclusion. Who you don't allow into your store because of your pricing or because you just, make people uncomfortable. It says more about your brand often than who you do allow in your store. So for instance, Hot Topic, Abercrombie and Fitch often will play music in such a way that it irritates old people, like specifically crafted acoustically to make old people uncomfortable in the store. And by old, I mean like over the age of 30. So I think I'd be included in this. I was at the mall and I wanted to visit an Abercrombie and Fitch just as a marketer to see what they were doing. And my wife just could not get herself to go into the store. Like, they had done such a good job excluding her through their marketing, through their branding, that they succeeded, right? They are not trying to appeal to us. We're not in their target audience, and that is the whole appeal of their brand. So think about the kind of person who buys a Nike product. They're younger. They're very young. Their primary demographic is a certain kind of young man who buys sneakers every month. And Nike's constantly coming out with new sneakers that are limited runs. And this young man buys that sneaker, much more likely to be ethnically diverse, or to be very much kind of politically aligned with the, cops are bad and they shouldn't be doing these terrible things. And their biggest threat, Nike's biggest threat, the company that's going after this exact same market, is Under Armour. And Under Armour's done a great job resonating with that urban market of athletes. And suddenly Nike is really taking the hit. And, I don't think a lot of good old boys, and I don't think a lot of baby boomers, because remember, Trump's support is predominantly amongst older people over the age of 40. And Nike customers are predominantly people below the age of 25 and really below the age of 20. When you're buying lots of athletic products, specifically Nike branded athletic products, you're not buying it to go run the treadmill in the gym. That's not why you buy Nike shoes. You're buying Nike shoes because you're in high school. And that group is who they're trying to appeal to with this Just Do It campaign. So I think this is actually a savvy move. It is, they are claiming a side, so they are going to lose some market. So the question is, what they lose amongst Trump supporters, will that be made up for in what they gain in Trump haters? And I suspect that it probably will work out. I think they're going to gain more than they lose. And this is the same thing we see when conservatives will boycott CNN. That's of no value because you already don't watch CNN. So you boycotting CNN isn't taking any money away from CNN. You already effectively chose to boycott CNN when you switched over to Fox News. And if you have not bought a Nike product in 5 years, your quote unquote boycott isn't going to make any difference. And I think that as they do the research, they'll find that pans out, that the 55-year-old Trump voting man who hasn't bought a Nike product in 20 years, his boycott, and him finding some shoes to burn isn't going to make much of a difference to their bottom line.
So I don't necessarily agree with or disagree with any of your overarching points, as far as a marketing standpoint, as far as exclusion, and I understand the theoretical basis behind all of that. I can't help but think that maybe Nike's shooting themselves in the foot still, because I have a set of Nike shoes sitting in my closet that I bought when I was a cop. And I didn't buy them because they had a swoosh on them. I bought them because I went to several outlet stores who had sales on shoes, and these shoes were black, and I needed black shoes for my uniform, and I needed something that I could ride a bicycle in, and they were on sale, and they worked great. And they've been great shoes, and I've used them for a few years now. now it's going to be time for me very shortly to go buy a new set of shoes, and I'm going to have to think to myself, is this Nike swoosh thing, what am I aligning myself to? Because what I will say as a police officer is I can tell you that, and just as a student of humanity, people dress according to what group they want to be identified with. So if you're a country cowboy, you wear cowboy boots. And that's how you dress to identify yourself as a specific person. If you are an urban kid who wants to be identified with a hip hop crowd, you're going to sag your pants. You're going to wear a certain type of blue jean. You're going to wear a certain type of hoodie and a certain type of shoe. And maybe Nike takes that. But I say all that to say to the point that I am not certain that your position is correct. I am not certain that your position is incorrect. I am really just going to be interested to watch the whole thing go down. Because, you could be 100% spot on, Thomas, and it's a great move for Nike. And that could be the case. But I'm not convinced at this point that it's also not a terrible move. So time will tell, because one of the reasons that I think it might be a bad move is because let's bring it back to football for a second. Let's talk about the future of football in this nation. And of course, they're not totally related, so I'm kind of going off on tangents. But we're talking about the future of this nation and where the nation is headed and where brands are headed. I don't know. It's a tough one to really decipher, but we feel very divided right now. And to pick one side over the other, I think it could be a very calculated, smart move, but you could also be shooting yourself in the foot, and it's just going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, when it comes to the future of football, I think the biggest existential threat to football is not politics entering the football field. I feel like this is something that football can handle. It may hurt their ratings, but I think that in general, people still want to watch football somehow. And the NFL will find a solution that kind of gives them the biggest possible audience moving forward. I think the existential threat to football as a sport is the fact that playing it causes permanent brain injury. And the evidence for this seems to be pretty conclusive. And there's already a movement to ban it. So the strategy for banning football over the next 40 years is first you ban it in middle school, which is already starting to happen. A lot of middle schools don't have football because it's really damaging on young brains. And then you ban it in high school, and then you later ban it in college, and then last it gets banned in the NFL, where they pass laws that either get rid of football altogether or make it such that the rules are changed so it's not really football anymore because of trying to protect the head. And the NFL has been very conscious of this movement, and people like Malcolm Gladwell, who are very outspoken against football as a sport, and the fact that why should a academic institution promote a sport that causes brain injury? It seems to be a violation of the very essence of what it means to be an academic institution, where your brain is developed and you're made to be smarter and more educated, and have a broader view of the world, and you're getting constant low-level concussions that causes parts of your brain to deteriorate and even fade away altogether, where you go crazy and lose control of your own emotions because of the fact that you play football. And that, all of these scandals with football players being aggressively violent, there is some discussion in the academic community, scientific community, that this may be connected with these CTC. I forget exactly what the letters are, but it's the brain injury, the continual brain injury that they have, that it makes them more violent people. And I will say, football as a sport already selects for violence. So a peaceful person isn't going to be drawn to the game of football. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out as the evidence becomes more clear. Will it be like smoking, where the fact that smoking is bad for you is very clear, but we're like, well, it's your choice to smoke as you want to, if you want to, as long as you're over 18. Once you're an adult, if you choose to poison your body with smoke, you can do it, as long as you don't do it somewhere where your secondhand smoke is going to bother somebody else. I see that being a possibility, but that gets rid of high school football. A high school student is not an adult and can't choose whether or not he wants to take on permanent brain injury. And if you get rid of high school football, suddenly your college football players aren't as good because they haven't been practicing in high school, and the sport deteriorates just through lack of excellence. Dustin?
So when we switched back, you said that it's not going to be the politics that destroys football. It's going to be the science behind it. And actually, I think it's going to be both, because I think the science behind it is going to be very, very political. So now we're talking about the government removing football from its schools because the science is very firm on the fact that football screws up your head. I won't allow my kids to play football for that exact reason, because it rattles your brain. No matter how good the helmet technology gets, it will not prevent your brain when you hit something going as fast as you could possibly go, and that other something is going as fast as it can go, and you collide head on. Guess what happens to your brain inside your head? It keeps moving. And it collides against your skull, and it bruises a little bit, and it bleeds a little bit, and you do this over and over and over and over again. Eventually, you have enough scar tissue and dead brain matter in there that it affects the way that you think. I mean, just think Muhammad Ali and how many times he got hit in the head and the terrible death that he endured because of it. So, yeah, I mean, football is very, very bad for you, much like being a gladiator was very, very bad for you back in Roman times because, well, that was a fight to the death. But yeah, so, and to bring it back to the politics, as I was discussing, is football is very much a part of our American culture. Think of going back to what we started this show on, how much money goes into football. There's a lot of money in basketball, there's a lot of money in baseball, but there's so much money wrapped up in advertisements and merchandise, so much money wrapped up with football. And now you're going to say that this piece of American identity is now, against the law. That might be taking a little bit too far, but it's outlawed in public schools. I don't think for a second, Thomas, that even when they do take it out of public schools, because I think eventually they will, that it's going to go away. I think it'll go private, and now you're dancing on a real fine line of banning people's private activities. You're going to ban people from participating in a sport. Maybe you can call it child abuse or something like that, but now you're really touching on a sensitive topic in American culture, telling people what they can and cannot do in their own time, telling kids what they can and cannot do. Because like it or not, there is a big section, especially with the poor in our nation. They don't expect to make it academically. They don't expect to make it in a large part by pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. A big part of urban poor and even rural poor culture is, I'm going to get really good at this sport, and I'm going to dig myself out of this crap hole by being good at a sport, which is why you see so many parents pouring thousands of dollars of their resources into sending their kids to these select camps and go to the private coaches, what have you, to become good at a sport. Because that's what they think they're going to succeed in. They don't think they have a chance academically, but you know what? I'm really good athletically, and that's how I'm going to pull myself out of this. So I don't think you just outlaw that in American culture. Maybe over time, and I'm talking decades, maybe even centuries, football will evolve or go away. But in contemporary culture, within the next few decades, I don't see it going anywhere because I think it is such a part of America and Americans.
Yeah, really, your comparison to gladiators, I think, is more spot on than you think. So a lot of people, their knowledge of gladiators, Roman gladiators, is from the movie Gladiator, where all of the fights are to the death all the time. And that's not actually how the Colosseum worked. That's not how gladiators worked. We did some archaeology, and we dug up a gladiator school. So they had schools for gladiators. And what we found in that school for gladiators was a graveyard of gladiator bones and gladiator bodies. And if it was the way that it's portrayed in the Hollywood movies, you would not see a lot of injuries on these bodies because they would fight to the death and then they would be dead. But instead what we found was years worth of injuries that had healed. And very often, the gladiator battles amongst professional gladiators would be to the blood until one gladiator drew blood. So they died a lot, and it was not a safe profession by any means. But it wasn't necessarily where 20 men enter the arena and only one man survives, like it always is portrayed by Hollywood. I've never seen it not portrayed that way. And I get it. It's more dramatic, and you can have the actors pretend to die on screen. Now, it was that way sometimes. They would use gladiatorial combats as a way of executing prisoners and as a way of executing prisoners of war. So if they just won some big battle and they brought in 1,000 prisoners of war, they'd have them fight to the death, and that really would be to the death. But in general, it was for entertainment, and sure, it was dangerous, and sure, people died sometimes. But in general, they just got hurt. They didn't die. And at that point, you're like, well, gosh, that's a lot like college football. It's like, well, people don't die that often. I mean, yeah, that guy died a couple weeks ago, but it's rare. Normally, they just get injured. I mean, suddenly, this is a distinction without much of a difference. It's just a distinction in type. It's a distinction in kind. And it was, Christians ultimately that brought an end to the gladiatorial combat, saying it's wrong that man should kill man for the pleasure of other men. And so I'm kind of conflicted on this because I genuinely enjoy football and I enjoy the violence of football. And I'm thinking, is this something I should feel guilty about? Is this something I should not do as a Christian? And I do think that there is a difference between something where it's primarily about death and killing and football, which seems to be quite a bit more separated. So it is a lot safer than being in a gladiatorial arena. So somebody would die in every gladiatorial fight. It's not like it was perfectly safe. So I don't know. I think that it would be nice if it were made safer. And both UT and A&M had players ejected for targeting. And I fully support that. Like often people are like, oh, how dare you eject a player for targeting? It's like, no, you can't target. It's somebody's head with your head. It's not just bad for them. It's bad for you. And those kinds of changes to make it safer. I don't feel like making helmets better is making it safer, because the safer the helmets get, the more players tend to use those helmets as battering rams. I've noticed. So in rugby, where there are no helmets, it's about as dangerous as football, where there are super amazing magical helmets. And it's because the rugby players make an effort to protect their heads, whereas football players use their heads kind of like rams do, in like the goats, and they batter each other and they like crash into each other's horns. That's how American football players use their helmets. It's like, oh, I've got some horns on my head. I'll crash into the next guy and knock him back and keep them from getting the first down. So I would not be surprised if eventually the social justice warriors of the world focus their attention on football as an evil sport for the damage that it does the players. And I will just want to say, you heard it here first, folks. If you've not heard this, you've not heard that this is a discussion. It's going to be a discussion, not of this decade, but probably of the next decade.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, Thomas, because like I said earlier, with people of color, football, sports in general, is seen as a way out of their own poverty. So it'll be an interesting discussion for social justice warriors. Are they going to say that the elite of this nation is just subjugating the minority class by making them their modern day gladiators? And I think that kind of discussion has happened always on the fringes of football, but nobody takes it really seriously because we all enjoy watching football so much. It's a guilty pleasure for all of us, even those who won't let our own kids play football. So yeah, it'll be interesting to watch, to say the least.
Yeah, because becoming a gladiator was a way to go from poverty to wealth. You could go from being a prisoner on death row to being a celebrity, a wealthy celebrity celebrated by the entire city through the gladiatorial arena. It was a way from going from the bottom of society to the toppest echelons of society. When Julius Caesar was putting people into the Senate, some of the people he was putting into the Senate were gladiators. Like, you could become a patrician through this use of the sword. Like, talk about social mobility. In fact, I think, if I'm from remembering correctly, when he was killed, he had a few gladiators like near him that didn't had to be distracted or something for the Senators to come in and stab him. If I'm remembering my Roman history correctly, but you can all correct me if I am wrong. Dustin, do you have any final thoughts on football? Let me just put it this way: will football exist in 2058? Yes or no?
Yes. I think it will exist in its current form. Who knows? I'm not that confident in predicting the future, but I think it's still going to be around.
I think high school football will be gone by then. I think college football might be gone by then. I think the NFL will still exist in 2058. But when we get to episode 5,000 of the Liberty Buzzard, if we're still doing this all that time in the future, we can check to see if our prognostications were correct. We would like to know what you think. Is football an evil sport? Is it something that you enjoy? Do you think that will last? What do you think about Nike and Colin Kaepernick? And do you think UT will be able to win any games this season? Sound off at libertybuzzard.com/035. And do check us out on Facebook and on YouTube. You can leave a review or a comment in those places as well. I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr.
I'm Dustin the Aggie Hammett.
And you've been listening to Liberty Buzzard. This episode of Liberty Buzzard is brought to you by Tom Umstattd CPA. Tom has over 35 years of experience helping people like you pay only their fair share in taxes. Don't let the IRS stress you out. Get Tom and his team on your team at taxmantom.com.